All right, everybody gather around. Let's get started with part two. If you guys weren't here for the first presentation that he did, this man is from Georgia, and a lot like many of us, he learned to shoe horses so that he could shoe his own. He continued to do that for 5 years, including an apprenticeship. He ultimately quit shoeing and became a barefoot evangelist. Since then, he's changed his outlook and believes in being open-minded and looking for a better way to do things. He offers barefoot trims, boots, and glue-on shoes in his business. He enjoys the tougher cases in farrier on laminatics and navicular horses. He's been around the world educating a lot of people, and he is a family man. The man, the myth, the legend, Pete Ramey.
So in the first one, we talked about how to identify these sinkers or the deep CE cases, and talked about how building sole thickness will go hand in hand with probably the pathology occurring, and definitely if you want to try to reverse it. So in this one, I want to talk about the actual nuts and bolts mechanic, how we improve CE or reverse sinkers, even though, again, I don't really agree with the mindset that it's sunk. To me, it makes more sense that the bone's right where it's supposed to be, right where it is all along, that the hoof capsule is migrated up the limb. But for either way, this is from one of Dr. Taylor's. This is one of his case studies from the 14-horse study that we put in your handouts. It's all these slides and your and the study are available on the AFA website in your handouts. This is one of the typical cases that basically Auburn, the team at Auburn Vet School, studied my work and what we were doing. It's not just my work, but it was me and my wife Ivy and apprentice Alex were working on these horses, and then Dr. Taylor as the attending vet, of course. But then, the veterinary team evaluated all this stuff before and after a period of time. So the details of it are all in there if you want to read more. This is one of the typical cases that is stuff we talked about in the first one. My goal is to grow that well-connected wall, to grow that thicker sole at the toe, to improve the palmar angle. A lot of these, basically all of them end up with a straighter HPA. Even though I don't really make a lot of trimming decisions personally based on the hoof pastern axis, I'll talk about what I do make heel height and palmar angle decisions on, but kind of by accident for me and my personal work, they all just about all end up with straight HPAs anyway. And this is a typical result. We reversed the CE a little bit. This one didn't have a really bad one to start with. And you see, if I'm just projecting my goal onto the real foot and the real result over a few months, several months of time, that I fell a little bit short of where I wanted to be. I built my sole, I got my palmar angle, but you can see where that true foot's kind of leaving my ideal line just a little bit. I gotta say, this is typical. If you've got these cases that we're talking about, where you have a deep CE, where you have a hoof capsule rotation, sometimes I grow perfect feet on those horses, but a lot of the times they're like this, that I'll have good growth at the top, and it just kind of lets go with the ground level. The why of it, maybe I've got a lot to learn, of course. Maybe the diet's not right. Maybe there's permanent internal damage. That's what I say when I fix it as far as I can, right? So, but whatever reason, just being straight up, this is the result we often get. A lot of good, a little bit of remaining bad. For the study, if you want, you can read that online. If you just Google 14 laminitic horses, and then click on the Science Direct link, they've got the entire study, not just the abstract, is posted. This is the way the veterinary team evaluated horses, how they measure the degrees of rotation, the palmar angle. There's how they measured the sole depth, And then there's also HL measurements, 2 measurements. That's hoof lamellar zone. It's from the outside to the coffin bone, measured up top, measured at the bottom. And of course the CE, we already explained all these with radiopaque markers that stop at the base of the hair follicles so that you get a repeatable measurement. And so the short version, if you don't want to read the whole thing, the way it turned out is rotation was reversed in all horses, some completely, some partially, as I said. Here's my important one: comfort restored to all. There's a couple of ifs and ands there. There was one foot, I think you could read it, but there was one foot that had some repeated abscessing, probably a sequestrum from remodeled coffin bone. Who knows, but one foot that did that. There was one horse that made it to post-evaluation that then died from non-hoof related causes before the long-term eval that they did, a year or 3 later. But that was my favorite part. They all were restored to their pre-laminitic level of exercise. CE improved significantly in several individual cases. Now this is very important to me because, to my knowledge, it's the only veterinary study. I should have said this before, but I'm trying to put a huge amount of information into a real tight area. So I'm going to answer any questions or discussion you want, but just I'll go ahead since I didn't say it yet.
I missed the first lecture. I'm first on this. What is CE?
All right. Missed the first lecture. Well, you're probably not the only one. I'll make that exception because I didn't even think about it with somebody. The CE is the vertical measurement. From the C is the coronet, the E is the top of the coffin bone. It's E for extensor process, right where it comes down. So on a lateral radiograph, if you've marked the coronet accurately at the base of the hair follicles, you can get an accurate track of the CE measurement. It's how we track a sinker. We track the health. Normal is somewhere between 0 and maybe 5 millimeters. When it's getting more than that, it's getting into pathology. This was one of Dr. Taylor's slides. This was one of the really good cases, so I'll show you the one that went kind of good, and this was one that went really good. And show you how they were tracking these things. Palmar angle changed from 10 to 4. Sole depth nearly doubled. HL zone went from 21-28 to 20-20 millimeters. CE from 14 to 9, rotation from 11 to 0. I should point out here that in my work at home, I do very little top dressing. I'll show you some of how I do this later. I'm a real stickler for breakover from underneath, but very, very minimalist to what I do for the top dressing. But for this study, so that no one could say that we reversed the rotation by cutting that off from the top, we didn't top dress any at all. None. So anything that you see that's right was really grown that way. My first slide, yeah, you could have knocked a little off and made that look perfect, but there was 0 dressing on top of any of these things that was done. A big premise to the study and to my work in general is, this is an oblique shot that shows, we talked about lamellar wedge in the first one. It shows lamellar wedge is not just a toe thing. Lamellar wedge can and does occur anywhere around us when the dermal and epidermal lamina separate. And it's your keratin cells that pile in between the dermal and epidermal lamina after you've had separation. I find this very important to recognize because, I'm not picking on any one breed, but I see this in a lot of off-the-track thoroughbreds. They take a lateral radiograph and they'll have perfect lamellar connection right down the toe, but then you'll have inch-wide lamellar wedges at ground level at the quarters. And to me, now as a non-veterinary farrier, I don't go around diagnosing laminitis, obviously, but in my work, in my consideration, this is going to be from the veterinary standpoint and a nutritional standpoint. I treat this like a laminitis case. To me, it's the same. To me, no matter where it is around the foot, being a little bit foundered is like being a little bit pregnant. You are, you aren't. And either you have perfect dermal and epidermal lamina connection all the way around everywhere, or it's separating. And when it's separating, there's a nutritional component and probably a medical component that can really help us. The last presenters, those case studies they were showing, in my work, I would be really treating love the work they did, by the way. I'm not talking about instead of, I'm talking about also that I would have been definitely treating these as from a nutritional standpoint as well. I see the ripples in the walls, the wall flare that's connected at the top and flares its way down as nutritional issues. Or at least that you can help them with diet. Oh, it's because I got to put it that way. All right. These next two subjects I got to go through really quick because I'm going to spend most of my time on mechanics, but we can't underscore this as this veterinary farrier teamwork is critical. I'm not just saying that because I'm supposed to. I mean for real. We need radiographs. We need management of inflammation and the pain. The diagnosis is a big deal because I do now. Also, for those of you that weren't here, I'm a laminitis specialist. This is what I do, and a lot of that is going to end up being like coaching the owner and how to change the diet and how to change the management of the horse. And me just farrier by myself, I don't have a leg to stand on. But once I get that diagnosis of laminitis, then then that gives me a toehold. Now I can because I'll fail. I view the veterinarian farrier role in laminitis as playing defense. I really do. There's only one person in the offensive role on these horses, and that's the horse owner. And so it doesn't matter how good your defense is, you're going to lose the game without any offense. And that's going to be true when you try to do it your way. It's going to be true when I try to do it my way. And of course, if you have any untreated condition, it's contributing to these same issues as well. Another thing with getting the diagnosis, that you get a Cushing's or an insulin-resistant diagnosis, then that'll give you, again, more ammunition than you usually have the vet in your corner, making sure that every bite that goes in the horse's mouth is less than 10% sugar and starch. That even a small amount of higher sugar stuff can cause a glycemic spike, which can shoot us in the foot. The other bit is with the nutrition profile. Again, I don't have time for that. If you want to see what I'm doing with that, go on our website, hoofrehab.com, click articles, click feeding the hoof, and there's a big, what I really like is custom balancing for these horses. It's the cheapest possible thing that anybody could do. Basically, we test the hay and the grass and whatever else they're eating, compare it to NRC values for horses, find out what's missing in the diet or out of balance and fix that. That's why it saves so much money, because most of us were programmed to, feed a bunch of stuff in case the horse is missing something. And so that's my favorite way. My bare minimum is California Trace Plus. I'm not on their payroll. It's just a very important tool for me that I basically, all of the horses in my care are on it, and I basically don't have any interest in putting my name on a horse that's not on at least that as a bare minimum. Now the mechanics, I'll slow down, okay? But I would be doing you a disservice to pretend like that the mechanics was all there is to these cases. Reversing CE, and it's really the same exact strategy that I use for growing out a hoof capsule rotation, or if there's both, it's pretty much the same strategy, real easy. Unload the walls. Okay, as I said in the first one, now that dumps too much weight to the solar corium, so it creates number two. And actually that's our crux of these cases. Protect the solar corium, I'll get into that. And then establishing flat impacts and heel first impacts. And the flip of that is avoiding the toe first compensation. A lot of horses, when they hurt on the bottom of the foot, have a very strong tendency to either walk on their tippy toes or walk on the sides of their feet. And if you have one of those types of movement as the predominant movement, you will not grow well-connected walls on a rotation, and you will not reverse the CE. So I almost feel like I got this backwards. That's the way I need to talk about it. But as far as priority, I would go 3, 2, 1 in the real priority that I'm doing. Lots of butts to all this stuff. On the surface, if you unload the walls, now you do not take your horse out of laminitis when you do that. You got to do that medically and nutritionally. But you take all the shear horses off the walls. You allow your CEs going to be able to move back down. Your hairline's going to be able to move back down where it's supposed to be. If you have a rotation or a big toe flare, you're going to be able to grow in well-connected walls. Okay? That would be kind of perfect except for, as I already said, you just overloaded the solar corium. Now that's a feature of these horses anyway. Anytime the lamina has failed, your solar corium is going to be the crux. And the trimming that I'll suggest that you do to get out of this mess, though, adds to that. So that's going to be very important in how we do that. As I said in the other one, I think a lot of people fear sole pressure, but sole pressure is if there's adequate thickness of material, if there's adequate sole bar, same thing if you're talking about the frog. Sole pressure is natural. Horses get along fine on their soles. The problems that you've seen with sole pressure has been either there wasn't enough armor, or probably more critically, that you weren't getting that pressure and release to the solar corium. That it's loaded, and then whatever you do in your shoeing package, your booting package, or in a glue-on package with these horses, that it has got to release 100% of that pressure. Then you'll have way less chance of having problems with your solar corium. Here's the way one of these cases typically looks. And again, like we showed you that in the first one, that tall hairline way on the ground is going to make you suspect that you've got a deep CE. Or it may make you suspect that you have a long hoof capsule. Going over to the next slide, but this horse only had 1/8 of an inch. The collateral groove was only 1/8 of an inch high off the ground. Okay, so that's going to make us think we have a thin sole. And so generally the trimming I'm doing on these horses is from 10 to 2 around the toe. I'm a stickler for bringing the breakover back. I don't really care if there's hoof walls sticking up longer than the sole because the horses don't seem to. Why that is, I'm not sure, but I suspect that a horse doesn't need a hoof wall on the ground to stand still. The horse needs a hoof wall on the ground at the toe to push off of. And so if we bring that breakover back in a bevel shape, as I'll show you as I typically do, that the hoof walls actually, the toe walls still actually engaged for use. But from 10 to 2 back through the quarter walls and the heel walls, horses really care if you leave hoof walls sticking up longer than the sole. And so the most I would ever do is like in that upper right corner. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but I trim the hoof wall down to the level of the sole without touching the sole because the sole's too thin. And then put a steep 45-ish degree bevel. You can see it in the lower picture down here, except on that one, as I've started growing in well-connected walls, I'm putting the same kind of bevel I would put on the walls, except now it's standing 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch above the sole, whereas when I'm first starting this horse in acute laminitis especially, I'm going to go down 2 sole level bevel from there. That's about the most I do, except in the shoeing, so on a horse that's barefoot or being booted. Now I'm going to show you a shoeing package that I do that I'll get a little more aggressive than that. But the reason for not, that some people want to, if I want to reverse my CE by 10 millimeters or improve my CE by 10 millimeters, we cut the wall 10 millimeters off the ground and let it drop down. Problem with that is when you get more aggressive like that, I guess it's like cutting your fingernails too short. You know, your fingernail's fine, but it's not used to it. That you'll create a lot of sensitive lameness that way. But then also you run a mechanical risk of bruising the dermis, that you're taking away armor for the dermal lamina. So about trimming to sole level and beveling from there is the most I'm talking about. Then you can see in the lower pictures, and that was some 4 months later, that now I'm shorter in my hoof capsule. Probably reversed some of the CE, some in there. I've grown better connected walls down, and now the trend is changing. Because I'm gonna talk about something that you may think is radical, of letting the horses load on the sole for a while, but to me, yes, it is. But it's also radical to let them run around on separated lamina for the next 10 years. So it's like, I just don't want you to, I don't want to scare you enough to stop you from trying it, but I want you to not ever take it lightly. This is something that I'm giving a lot of consideration. I'll show you. I got slides for that in a minute. I already talked about most of that. It must be either thick or protected. Don't try to reverse a CE until you get to a 1/2 inch thickness of sole, of bar, of frog covering your corium. Just chill and get adequate sole thickness built up before trying it. And then if it's not, I'm going to protect. I do use barefoot on perfect terrain as one of my protection methods. This so much depends on the terrain. If I've got a quarter, and sole thickness, if I've got a 1/4 inch thick sole and a hard rocky paddock, that horse is going to be protected. If I've got a 1/2 inch thick sole and good footing, free of rocks, I may do this exact same thing, including reversing CE and growing out hoof capsule rotation while barefoot. But the biggest thing I'm using are boots with padded insoles, tape-on pads. I do a little bit of casting with pads, and then shoeing packages. Again, you have to really, really think whatever you do for a shoeing package that you can get sole support when the foot is on the ground, but then a 100% release of any sole pressure whenever the foot's in flight. The boots I use, there's more and more, there's good boots out here. This is my favorite, the Easyboot glove. What I like about it is that it's all the modifications that I can do to it. The tread lends itself very well to a lot of the things that you've talked about here, of cutting the branches, the web down to different widths, to a lot of breakover adjustment I do on these, a lot of heel rockers I put on these, a lot of traction modifications I put on these. This one has a toe slot, because this wasn't a laminitic horse, this is a good wall connection. This was a Tennessee Walker with a number 0 wide foot and a number 2 length foot. And I use this slide because there's no other way that I've ever seen that you could successfully boot this horse. It's a high mileage trail horse. Then I cut that toe slot, heat fitted. That's the shiny and bubbles, is where I've heated that and made a custom boot on site. Not shown, there's another little rabbit rubber strap that will be added to the top. And so people argue about different hoof boots, and the answer to the question, which is the best hoof boot, is whichever one fits that hoof the best. And it's why some people swear by one, somebody else hates it. It's because whatever brand, whatever model fits that hoof and suits what the horse is doing is the right one. And so I can take these, so I have a minimal stock to carry in my truck of the different sizes, and I have a ton of different modifications that I can do to them to sit and make a boot that will perform on site. The shoe that I use is the glove glue on shell. I mean, I do other stuff too, but this is my go-to on these specific horses that we're talking about, trying to grow out a rotation or reverse a CE on a horse that's going to have a fixed shoe. There's other ways to skin this cat, but I like the softness of it. It seems to really agree with the laminitic horses. A lot of the boots and glue-ons are of a harder material that may suit some other situation, but with laminitis, I'm loving these. But inside there, I can do the same stuff. I can use different pads I use a lot of impression material. And here I'll get more aggressive. I know this horse isn't going to kick a rock, and so you'll see me doing a more aggressive unload of the walls in areas that I feel like I should, and then any cure to that's unloaded. I don't know how much any of you are into gluing, but it's way easier to do glue-on applications when the horse is standing on it. And I do some of those on my endurance clients, but I've got good solid feet on those horses, you know, and I want it to be as compact as possible. But on these laminitics, I'm going to always cure that on the pad and holding it up while it cures. And that way I know I'm getting that full release of sole, and it's bar and frog pressure when the hoof is in flight, and then full pressure when it's loaded. Directions, again, free on our website. Click articles, click that, modifications. And a lot of these, the toe slots, the traction rods, a lot of the different things I'm doing there. We have to move on. This is what I'm going to spend most of the time on for the rest of this thing. And again, it may be the most important is making sure that I'm not getting toe first compensation or side loading compensation. And as a side part of this is how critical comfort is. Again, as a farrier, you're playing defense on this thing. Most of these horses are on bad diets and in constant acute laminitis cycles, so we got a nutritional component, but also a lot of times you can't get the carb levels down low enough to break laminitic cycles, and have 24/7 chew time, which is also essential without exercise. So comfort, being able to start to move and exercise the horse becomes a very critical part of that too. Overall, the goal that I'm doing, starting on a rotating case, and from the first lecture, you'll be able to spot this thing. If you didn't have a radiograph, or like I see this, and that's what's telling me to demand radiographs, you probably see that lamellar wedge from ground level. Your hoof mapping methods will show you that toe needs to come back. But you'll know not to cut anything from the bottom because that won't have an 1/8 of an inch deep collateral groove depth at the apex of the frog, so you're probably going to know that thin sole is there. And you're probably going to know you have that elevated palmar angle because of the 1 5/8 collateral groove at mid-bar. So you should be able to put all that together and draw a picture of this same thing in your head, this rotated hoof capsule, that we need to grow a well-connected wall, and we need to grow more sole in the front of the foot. We probably are ultimately going to have material removed in the back of the foot. Now, on that note, most of these cases have a thin sole at the toe. Most of them have too much material in the back, which means that there's a point in the middle somewhere, this is usually the widest part of the foot, that the sole thickness is just right. Okay, so that's going to become important with our heel trimming. I'll get to that in a second. This is a typical case over 4 months, and if you look at the upper growth, you can see upper growth starting in and it's coming in more with better connection moving down. And then if you look at the lamellar wedge versus the sole, that you can see in that left photo that the darker gray, that's your true sole, and then your lamellar wedge, these become very visible, and how it's getting narrower as you're growing better connected wall down from the top. You should see that lamellar wedge getting narrower. The heel height on these horses is probably the most variable thing that I do. Because, again, I'm thinking about the mechanics of this thing in motion rather than standing still. A lot of times I'll do this, but you need to remember that point with these, that if that whatever heel work you do needs to be behind that point that the sole was just right. If it's too thin in the front, that a lot of people not recognizing that or thin in the sole, or even like this one, if you were trying to take heel down on the whole thing, thinning the area that's already too thin, just even trying to get 1/4 of an inch of sole off this horse. The way to think about this, even if you do cut to that dashed line, and that's what this individual horse needs, it looks like a rocker, but whatever amount, oh wait, we want to go back. No, no. that you're hoping to establish that correct plane that the horse is going to set back on it. And then it's hopefully easier to see that you'll have that well-connected wall to grow in. I want to talk this a minute. I don't have time for a lot of toe stuff, and like I say, y'all are as a group or understand this breakover and toe stuff really well. But a lot of people are teaching to cut to the red line, to basically use the upper growth and then cut that all the way down. The worry is that if you leave that down there, that it'll pull it out. But I find that to be a really huge mistake. And it's because even though that lamellar wedge is made out of keratin, it doesn't have the organizational structure of hoof wall. So if no other reason, just for a reason of padding the top, if the horse kicks a rock and you don't want to bruise the dermal lamina, I'm willing to leave extra out there. And again, it's just safer. There's also a problem of destabilization. Part of the strength of the hoof capsule is this nice round thing like that. And so you take a already broken down, our lamina failed in all the cases that we're talking about. And then you add to that, cutting the hoof wall in half and leaving a separate height, you just destabilize an already unstable situation. So I like to, I'm a stickler for that breakover underneath, and I'll set the trim cycle at whatever I have to keep that breakover right all the time. But I'm very conservative about what I do up on the top. So I'd be cutting about that blue line. I don't want to leave that point stuck out there like that. That's crazy, but I'm going to be very conscious when I'm taking it from the top of leaving an adequate armor on top. So if things go well, 4 months later, we've grown in half a well-connected foot. Hopefully we've thickened the sole from the bottom. At this point, I still wouldn't be trimming that dash line. I'd still be keeping the breakover in a good spot, but trying to leave extra armor on top. Then it'll look like this. This is another one that was at, this 4 months is a good time I like to take pictures. So I have all these 4-month pictures because you can see what's happening. I tried to line these up best I can with the heel and the frog. The frog stays stable. I don't know if you can see that yellow where I drew the sole, but you can see the sole versus the lamellar wedge from ground level. That stays constant because the sole's growing from the bottom of the coffin bone. The apex of the frog area is growing from the coffin bone. These are stable. The hoof capsule rotates away. So you can see that as you grow the well-connected wall down again, that lamellar wedge is getting narrower. So eventually, if things go well, we grow in a well-connected wall with adequate sole thickness. You'll be able to tell that now your collateral groove depth is closer to a 1/2 inch off the ground of the toe. If you've got a 5-ish degree palmar angle, you're probably going to have an inch collateral groove height off the ground. So that's just extending off the first top. So about this, how much heel to cut off? What's the right heel height, the right palmar angle today? This represents the biggest variance in my work, and I see a lot of people with different hoof methods that are wanting to cut that dash line. I'm seeing this a lot in veterinarians too. They're pulling up a radiograph and telling us to cut here, and it'll be not parallel with the coffin bone usually, because nobody wants a 0 degree palmar angle, but a few degrees off of it. They'll draw us a line and write us a shoeing prescription. I find this to be a really, really big mistake, because again, what I view is the most powerful force that we have to help us reverse these cases is that flat and heel first impact. More specifically, avoiding compensative toe first impact or side loading. That derails everything. But I have a big principle that drives everything that I do, is that horses don't tend to heal themselves and they don't tend to wreck themselves while they're standing still. They tend to heal themselves and they tend to wreck themselves while they're moving. So I question why we make so many decisions on while the horse is standing still. Now, I'm not knocking it, but we need to evaluate him standing still and take in all the, I love Michael Wildenstein's, or Wildenstein, I guess, his, teaching, how to evaluate and really look for all the different angulations. So I'm not saying that we don't look at them standing still. I'm just wondering why we would prioritize how they stand over how they move. So I make my heel height decisions based on movement. And that's because really everything about the structure is designed to spread force out over a wider area to distribute load. But that doesn't work. If a horse lands toe first, now we're driving them down the tip of the coffin bone. Now that perfect shape of the coffin bone, the lateral cartilage that are distributing energy, now you really do have a little wedge pointing down your solar corium. You're increasing your stress on the lamellar connection. The biggest cause of this type of movement, or I won't say the biggest, a big cause of this is cutting the heels too low for the current conditions. A lot of things can cause a horse to be sensitive in the back of the foot or to resist extending and loading flat. But it can be joint problems. It can be muscular problems. Some muscular damage or just because he's stiff, because he's been in the stall for 22 hours. In all sorts of ligament, tendon injuries, lots of reasons why a horse can do that. So I have a tendency to leave a longer heel on these horses, especially in the beginning. Problem with that is that the heel gets high enough, and now even if a horse lands flat, or in this case it can even land slightly heel first, and you're still having those same mechanics of driving down on the tip of that bone. So the heel height to me is a very important tightrope walk that I'm trying to balance. And so that I've already said over and over again, but yeah, the comfort is critical to these horses. Throw being nice and humane out, and just when you consider that we are dealing with carbohydrate overload in most of them, that we're going to need to exercise to break out of it. So the heel height for me on these horses or the palmar angle is a very, very huge decision. I make it with a lot of things that I want to get the heel as low as possible without thinning the sole. And I already told you that in the first one, that half inch to 5/8 of an inch of sole thickness is just, I'm done. I stop. And so perhaps the way I use the sole as a guide, or at least a guide of, okay, that's as far as I can go. The stance is going to be important. If a horse stands like a goat on a rock, say I'm walking up to one of these rotating cases and I've got a 25-degree palmar angle, and he's standing on like a goat on the rock, that's going to lean me towards being more conservative and showing me that there's a stiffness there that the horse isn't going to be able to move well if I take a lot of heel off. The flip of that, if he's rocked back in the founder stance and he's rocked back on those heels, he's showing that he has the flexion. He's showing me that he has the ligament, the tendon or ligament laxity, the muscle laxity. He's got everything he's going to need. It's enabled me to get this line of thinking I'm going to show you has enabled me to get away from the cutting a half inch off gradually and watching how he goes and everything, because the half inch can be too much on some of these horses. Then there's sometimes that I need to go to a perfect, correct palmar angle in one huge trim. And I'll show you one of those in a minute. Of course, the movement, same story. If he's moving stiff, toe first, I'm not cutting any heel off that horse probably. But if he's moving with his feet out front, it's going to lean me towards more aggressive response to an optimal forward stretch. I'll show you that in a minute. Frog health. The wear pattern is a big one. And then learning from your previous, these are all, I have more slides for. We'll skip through them fast. But learning from your previous mistakes. I wish I could sit here and tell you that I nail this correctly every time. I don't. I do the best that I can, and I nail it sometimes and I screw it up sometimes. But what I try to avoid is repeating that same mistake over and over again. I take measurements of my heel height based on the collateral groove measurements, and then we'll talk about reed wear pattern, how the horse moves before and after throughout, to then adjust and come to start where I thought it needed to be, and then next time I put it where it needs to be. So this is a second foot over a 9-month duration. I'm going to use it to show you. This horse, we have the deep, probably fungal infection in the bulbs. In the beginning photo, you drag a hoof pick through there, he's jumping. If you dump that frog on the ground, he's just going to go toe first. Okay? So what I'll tend to do is, and I'll show you that trim in a minute, but the general, what I tend to do is leave a longer heel. But the idea is not to lift the frog off the ground. You lift the frog off the ground, it's just going to fall further and further out of function. The idea is to leave that heel long enough that as that heel sinks into the ground, that it will reduce the frog pressure down to something that the horse will voluntarily bear. Now, same foot 9 months later, now I'm getting a healthier frog, that I would be expecting a much more work out of that frog. I'll be able to trim the heels lower. So that evaluation is important. A big one is this was actually a really awesome moving BLM herd stallion in the wild. Unless you look close, he was magnificent. Really cool mover, except if you look at that left front, that's as much as he can straighten that limb. And you see the foot is kind of a club foot going on. So this next part is evaluating them in a forward offer of a stretch that is very important for me for, well and simple, how to tell a club-footed horse that maybe has that club foot to support a problem and needs it. You'll mess up if you cut that heel off of there, versus one that just has high heel that's begging for somebody to cut a heel off of at one good time. This is an important way of how I sort through that. Let's see if these work. This first horse is a very, very beautiful moving horse, and I'm just offering, I'm not grabbing that leg and pulling on it, but I'm just offering the chance to do a forward stretch here. And she even, by throwing her neck down, that even intensifies the stretch. So this is the thing, I know all of you have brought the hoof forward to stand or to your thigh, and the horse just you didn't ask him to. He just bears down on you, moans and groans, okay? That's the perfect reaction to being offered that stretch. That's good. And that's going to tend to come with a horse that's going to be happy down in that 5-degree palmar angle range. But if you ever also picked up the next horse, or often the same, the other leg on the same horse, try to do the same thing, and he can't even straighten the carpets. He's fighting, he's stiff. He can't even, it's not even possible to straighten that limb. It's going to be very predictive of a horse that's going to go better on a higher heel. This next one's this is actually the better foot of a navicular horse. And again, I'm just offering it. I'm not yanking on this thing. You could hurt a horse that way. But see, he can't, and you'll see he'll just bounce into it for just a second. And this horse would benefit from body work. Professional body work. This horse will benefit from routine stretching and warm up before exercise. And this horse is going to benefit from not being too cut happy with the heels. Okay. Back to the same other good movers. No, this is an in between. This one's a perfectly normal horse, but come right out of the stall. It was in the stall overnight. She doesn't quite straighten the limb, but this horse is just a little bit stiff. It's not digging or jumping at the chance to do that stretch. This would affect my heel height decision, 0 whatsoever. To me, this is within a range of normal. If a horse must spend 20 hours in the stall, this is what I'm going to expect in a healthy horse when they first come out of the stall. And this is back to that other one. And I even, you know, just laying into me with everything she's got. I even try to put it down. And she's like, oh, no, I'm not ready yet. You know, and lays into it again. Again, probably going to like that lower heel. It's going to lean me towards being more immediately aggressive. This is the worst side, both in navicular pathology and history of lameness. On this navicular horse, I think there's just no way he can fully straighten that limb. Again, I'm going to be very, very careful with the heel trimming that I do. Now that'll help me sort through. Now the cutting work at the front, can you see the red line? Not me, I promise. That was done by someone else a few days before I was called in. Really don't know what they were thinking. In dealing with it since then, I really think that's all blood right there. Really think that the coffin bone got nippered in this horse because this foot has just never come right. But at any rate, for the purposes of showing you this, that enabled, but the collateral grooves at the back of the foot are like 3 inches tall. The 3 inches off the ground. This frog, I don't know how well you can see it with the lights on, but is deeply infected. I mean, I could get a pain response by touching that frog. Okay, so I already know going in, I'm not going to dump that frog on the ground. It's just going to throw it right up there. But I stretched him, and first he was standing in founder stance, rock back on his heels. If you made him move, he was rock back there. I evaluate him with that same stretch, and he's laying into it, loving that forward stretch. So if it weren't for that weak frog, I would have gone to a 5-ish degree palmar angle in one trim. But what I did was pretty aggressive. It was coming from there to there. It took a lot of heel off that horse. And rocked him back to a much better palmar angle. Now, if he had been up stiff and on his toes, if I'd offered that stretch and he couldn't straighten that front limb, I would still rocker that back a little bit. Just give him somewhere to go. Try to get the foot out of the way of a longer stride. So I'd probably cut it that red. If that frog hadn't been so infected and sensitive, I probably would have cut that foot at the yellow. Okay, so this is how I'm kind of trying to put all this information to try to decide what I can get away with on day one. No matter what I decide, when I put the foot on the ground, I hit the ground, my chin's on the ground, I'm looking at that thing. It's very bad, it's very dangerous if that heel doesn't come to the ground. But he rocked back on it, just like the drawing I put you. Maybe now you can see, what this well-connected wall that I would hope to grow. And, it's like the drawing that I was showing you, that rocked back there, that I've got missing sole I need to grow in, I've got well-connected growth that I need to bring down from the top. And I mess up this way too. In fact, everything I know I learned about messing up. I put that foot on the ground and the heel he doesn't rock back on it like that, I'm going to build it back up. And with epoxy, or certainly if I was doing any kind of a shoeing package or anything, but I get along pretty well with just, if you're going to buy something for it, I like everything super fast, but I always have open tubes of shoe glue that are going bad and time's ticking, so I just do that. But very big deal. Don't leave one up on his toes like that. A little bit of room that if he loads well, but then maybe stands and he'll cop back and forth and pick one up a little bit, that can be okay, kind of edging you into a therapeutic direction, but just be careful with that one. But this is why everyone's always, or probably always told you, to only make these heel changes very slowly, okay, is because you can cause damage to ligaments, tendons, by if you go too fast. That's what I'm trying to tell you right here. But to me, it could be more aggressive, more dangerous to leave them jack up like that for long term because of how much damage you're doing in other places. So I feel like if I can use these things I'm trying to tell you to be aggressive when I can, and to take it easy when I can't be aggressive, then that helps me, help a higher percentage of cases. Here's where the mess it up part starts coming in, and that I'm very big on reading wear pattern. Whether it's a shoe, whether it's a boot, whether it's a barefoot. I also am very big into leading horses out before and after trim. I'm also very big into interviewing clients. You getting the riding work you need to do. Is the horse moving a lot? Is the horse been comfortable all throughout the cycle? This is giving me information. But really, when I move a horse out, I'm only seeing it on the ground that I choose to lead it on, not the horse's lifestyle. I'm only seeing it right before a trim or shoeing, or right after. When I'm reading the wear pattern, I'm getting the most accurate thing I can get of how that horse has been moving throughout the entire trim cycle. And so, this one, and this one's got to even all the way around. A lot of times, because I am a stickler from 10 to 2 for bringing that breakover back. So a lot of times I can think of horses moving well, even though it may not have walls sticking above the sole, that I trim that more. But coming through the quarter walls and heels, a lot of times it'll be the bars too. They're all in uniform height. I know I did good last time. That horse has been moving well, and so if I'm seeing signs of toe first compensation, this one loading on the toes, the bars and heels, quarters are growing willy-nilly. This horse has just been toe stabbing all the time. That I'm going to be more conservative. I'm also going to be having the horse owner treat the central sulcus every day, because that's probably the central and sulcus infection is probably a real primary issue there. It's eating the hair away. You got that scabby, crusty stuff up in the hide. A lot of signs of what I view as fungal infection that's painful, and it causes a lot of this. So I would put a lot of weight to this. I know you can't shoe a horse this way. This is for when I'm trimming on boots and pads and the padding glue-ons and stuff that I'm doing. And you all know if you do try to leave more heel on a horse, it just tends to underrun or distort, cave under sideways. And there's a limit to how much heel, but I found that if I leave my wall height higher, build it only at the bar wall junction, and then rocker behind that point, that I can build a lot of heel on the horse. In fact, I use this to raise heel angles on. There's another tactic that I use for underrun heels, of loading them on the bar wall junction and then undermining the tubules before it. To let the heel tubules just drop down, sometimes right away. That if you can preserve your height at the bar wall junction while undermining. But anyway, and this one had a healthy frog, but actually needs a higher heel because of a joint or a ligament problem or something. I forget, but it's a horse that doesn't flex well, that can't straighten the knee with the limb out front at all. That I'm leaving that heel, but by putting that rocker behind the bar wall junction, you can gain a surprising amount of height while not getting the distortion. This is that same foot I showed you earlier, the upper left-hand corner, January, the right-hand picture, October. But this is doing that I'm going to want to leave more height there. That at the bar wall junction, I left it the longest. In fact, I didn't trim it at all. And I know it's clean, but I didn't remove anything except the balance at the bar wall junction. Then this little rocker is also a tactic that I can let the heel walls go higher without bringing weight bearing forward. And so I can keep my weight bearing back, kind of have my cake and eat it too. Have a longer heel and still have my weight bearing back. So, so then this was but from January to March, this is in between. This was my second visit on a 4-week cycle that I've had the owner treating the thrush. So you can see the frog is filled and the missing material starting to get wider, starting to open up. I'm going to start letting that frog, taking that heel lower. been paying a lot of attention in the bottom right photo there, that except at breakover, which that's a normal amount, that I had that uniform wall thickness through the quarters and through the heels, also again usually the bars. So that means that I've probably got the horse moving correctly. I probably made good decisions last time, and so that horse is on track and he's moving, starting to use that frog, which has been the real thing that led me to the October, much wider, much healthier situation. And one more thing, number 8 is don't forget rule number 7. One of the worst things, in my opinion, that you can do is fall into habit. That you have this thing that you do, and you keep doing that thing. Always adapt it to the movement. And you also have to understand, and this has been beautifully demonstrated by the other speakers here, is what's right is a moving target. You find something that works on a horse today, it may not be what's working on the horse in 6 months or in 2 years. So you always have to recognize that this should be changing, hopefully for the positive. Sometimes it's changing for the negative. We need to be adapting. And I take care of too many horses to remember this brings up record keeping. Every trim or shooting, I sit and write not everyone. I have maintenance cases that I'm not changing the foot anymore. I'm not trying to change the foot anymore, that I'll get slack on that. But when I'm trying to change a foot still, whether I'm succeeding or failing, I'm writing down everything. I'm measuring this stuff because I won't remember by next time. And if I did kind of remember, it's much more accurate if I know I trimmed that heel down to 1.25 inches relative to the collateral grooves, and that horse spent the last 4 weeks toe loading, then I need to leave this time or something. I messed up. And so I don't beat myself up too bad about it, but I make adjustments. And there's no way that I could do that without the pictures and without the record keeping. And so I always show this one. It's 2001, you see. This is actually the first one. I'd done a bunch of CE improvements prior to this, but it's the first one that I ever documented with radiographs. But I'm sorry that it's so fuzzy. It really is good on a computer screen. But you see just how much that thin sole relates to CE. I'm not saying one causes the other, but at least if you're going to fix it, that there's basically your hoof capsule is usually getting shorter while you build sole thickness, but while your CE improves. So just looking at the kind of the back and forth on that to watch what's happening. And here's the foot. And again, hopefully the first lecture, if you didn't know it already, and keep you from ever falling for that trap, that collateral groove depth, the white there, I traced the true sole versus what's between the sole, the wall is the Lamellar wedge. But I have that 1/8 of an inch deep collateral groove at the apex of the frog. So my first glance, this foot's going to be, that foot's too long. I need to cut a lot from the bottom. But then that shallow collateral groove tells me I have that thin sole. And I also have I think this one was like a 3/4 of an inch collateral groove depth at the back of the foot. So even though that heel looks long, I know that I just have a high CE. And so then as I look at that one 8 months later, now I've got short heels, short toe, but I know that I've built that sole. The collateral groove depth is still in the 3/4 to 1 inch range. And so, but then that hairline has moved to a more correct spot. My 1/2 inch deep collateral groove, the apex of the frog, showing me I built that sole. And of course, confirming the same thing on radiographs, the before and after there. Questions, discussion, argument? Yes?
A couple of slides back, when you talked about lowering the heel, it looked like you really lowered the quarters of that foot. What was the purpose of that?
Let me back up and make sure we're talking about the same thing. This one? What I'm doing there is just, it's a typical trim that I do on a barefoot horse. But then also for these horses in the glue-on package I'm showing you and that are running on boots and pads is I'm just following the sole. From 10 to 2 forward, I'm worried about my breakover. From 10 to 2 back, I follow that sole. Now this is really radical looking because I'm leaving a longer heel on this horse than I normally would. And I was forced to I probably shouldn't have even brought that picture here because it'd make confusion. But the alternative, if we take it as a given that this horse needed a heel that high today, the only alternative would be leaving those quarters standing a ½ inch longer than the sole. And if I did that, they're just going to flare and separate all the way to the top. So I may have been kind of backed into this because it was a lesser evil, but actually this horse and other horses that are done this way does very, very well. I know it's weird from a horseshoer perspective, but the horse will be happy like this.
The other question I have is, this foot, you can even show this for me, have a lot of strength and mass compared to a mushy little thoroughbred foot that I'd be often working with.
Yeah.
You don't have any heel so low. How does that alter your approach to that?
If we're going to pick on thoroughbreds, and I know that we all know what it means when you say thoroughbred foot, that even if it's on a quarter horse. So yeah, I got you, but I'll go with that because I know exactly what you're talking about. Most thoroughbreds, I start up and I do 3 back-to-back packages of that shoeing package I showed you, or something similar, where I'm able to pad inside there, because I also will have splatted hoof walls along with that. And so I do that same strategy of really unloading the wall and then using that pad and being sure that I don't have any pressure that doesn't release when the foot's in flight. And I find I can get away with loading those horses on the sole. At the end of 3 shoeing cycles, I have a very strong tendency to have improved the frog, grown a thicker sole, and grown half of a hoof capsule down that's well connected. And from there, I'll branch out into the other stuff that I do. But I pretty much long ago gave up trying to go after a splat-footed thoroughbred from any kind of a barefoot standpoint. Yeah. Yes.
You had quoted the research in the beginning with 14 horses.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering what type of control you used on the off foot.
There wasn't that'd be a great way to do one, but that's not the way it was done. What they did is they did a veterinary evaluation of the lameness before and after. They did the parameters I showed you, the radiographic parameters, to scale radiographs so they could take exact measurements. And so it was just a combination of how the horse felt before and after the treatment period, and then the radiographic parameters. But we were doing the whole horse. Okay, so and then they did an additional part that they came back 3 years later and did another survey to see if any of them had relapsed.
Was there any medical or dietary intervention at the same time you were doing your...
There was. That's why it's all in the study. That's why I put it there. But the real quick short version of it is there were different. What were the drugs that were used in the study? This is Dr. Taylor, if you don't know her yet. Do you remember? Read the study. There was some of the horses. Bute, she said, mostly bute, but there were diet changes on them. They were on the supplement that I was telling you to do, and basically all of them that we could convince the client to do was cutting carbohydrates from the horses too. Basically, I think not all, but all of the horses we recommended diet changes for, and I think that almost all the horses had some degree of diet change that occurred. Because that's why I'm telling you straight up that this stuff's all got to work together. One thing I mentioned, or I didn't mention, I had a slide for it, but I forgot, is these trim cycles. Another thing that I've really enjoyed hearing throughout this, listening to all the other speakers, is that push for that 4-week schedule, maybe a 5-week schedule if things are going well, a 4-week schedule if you're trying to make positive changes in a foot. I just want to tell you that I take this a step further than what most of the presenters talked about, which is I set the trim cycle. I set that based on 90%, 80% on what the horse needs. About 20% does get skewed by my travel routes. If I think the horse needs to be on a 4-week schedule, but I'm going to be by there at 3 or 6, it gets a 3-week. And I don't negotiate that. And again, but that's important to me because I do work rehab for a living. I do work the hard cases for a living. But honestly, in my opinion, that's the most important thing you can do for prevention. Okay? Not necessarily a 4-week schedule, but that the farrier sets the trim cycle. You do that honestly, and you do that based on what the horse needs. If you come back in 4 weeks, and you don't have overgrowth, you don't have distortion, everything's fine, start stretching it. But if you come back in 4 weeks, I know you see it, dang, I should have been here 2 weeks ago. Pull it back. And if the client won't do it, you do what you want to. I tell them that they can fail with somebody way cheaper than me, number one, and number two, if they're gonna make somebody look bad, make one of my competitors look bad. I want to look good. I really think, now there is some wiggle room that we can use, okay? But I really, really advise against letting horse owners set the shoeing or trimming cycle based on what they want to pay for. We got to put the horse first, and your reputation will be better. All right, thank you all. If anybody wants to talk after,